It's John Yu here. I don't have any problems with recording.
I'm good.
Awesome. Awesome. Thank you. All right. So we're
David, Paul, you talked about a transition in the economy. It also seems that what COVID has revealed is how different the economy is and how people participating in it. And we've started to see, I think, a really interesting discussion about a guaranteed annual income. Something I've for a very long time thought makes a lot of sense. Could you speak to that?
Yes, I'd be delighted to. Thanks for your question, Paul. Justin Trudeau is walking out to the microphones every day now, adding another small benefit to the Canada Emergency Response Benefit, the CERB. And I know you and I have been saying this right from the start of this crisis. If only the federal government had started with a guaranteed livable income, he wouldn't be coming out to the microphone and saying, well, we've left out this group, or we've left out that group, or we forgot about seniors. Yesterday it was about small business people. Last week it was about seniors. The week before it was about renters. A series of these announcements of people who haven't been caught, have fallen through the cracks, who are not in the safety net. And this all could have been prevented with a guaranteed livable income. I've noticed that even Jagmeet Singh has come on board. The NDP has never campaigned on a guaranteed livable income. But just 2 weeks ago, Jagmeet Singh started advocating for it, even though they didn't campaign in 2019. And that's great. It's one of the roles of the Green Party, is to put forward fantastic ideas and have others adopt them. But I do think that this government is really missing an opportunity. And I have Green Party friends who have been sending me messages about how tough it's been for them. They've had to shut down their small businesses. They have small mouths to feed, and it's tough. And this could have been avoided with a guaranteed livable income. We know from the pilot projects in Finland and in Ontario that there's huge potential for this. And there's ways to do it in a way that's fiscally responsible and fair. And that's what we've stood for in the Greens, and we will certainly be campaigning on it in the next campaign. Thanks, Paul.
Wonderful. Gavin, I see you have your hand raised. I will take you off mute, I believe. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, hi. Last election campaign, there was a lot of talk about promises. Liberals promised 1 billion trees planted. I think Elizabeth May promised 1 trillion trees, and I had a breakfast with Elizabeth May and challenged her on that as to who is going to do it, how's it going to be paid, what kind of trees, and where. There will be an election campaign coming up in the future. And what I see is that only by getting everybody involved, politicians can talk about grand plans, but it's the citizens of the country that will have to do the hard work. And one thing that COVID-19 has given us is it actually has changed human behavior. So how do politicians change human behavior? Thank you.
Thank you, Gavin, for the question. I think you're right. I think we all need to pitch in to address the climate emergency. You've probably heard Elizabeth use this expression, it has to be all hands on deck. And I agree. I think that's exactly the right approach. Elizabeth uses the analogy of moving on to a war footing. That's a little bit more sensitive in the Green Party, that is one of whose core values is nonviolence, but I like the idea of all mobilizing together. We did this, Gavin, in the last campaign. We brought our campaign team together and said, it's National Tree Day in September, and let's plant trees. And so we had about 20 or 30 people out planting trees in a park in Colwood, part of our riding. And I think that's what we need to do as leaders, is lead by example. We need people to see us out there doing these things, not just talking about it, but actually doing it. and then being able to go and tell the story. Yeah, we planted about 30 trees in Colwood on National Tree Day, and folks from our campaign are going back and making sure that those trees are surviving, they're properly watered, and so on. It's a commitment, but that's the kind of thing every single one of us needs to do. We need to not just make personal commitments, that's very important, but we need to work in community and mobilize our community, and we need to work nationally as well. And mobilize by example, by empowering each other. You know, we had volunteers who figured out how to source the right trees. We have foresters on our riding association who are expert foresters and teach in Haida Gwaii and at Royal Roads University. So let's mobilize the talent, let's get it out there, let's help others be leaders as well. And Gavin, it doesn't just apply to the climate emergency, it applies to our own party. We have fantastic volunteers in our party. And one of the things that amazes me, the number of people with, you know, plumbers and professional painters and people with master's degrees and PhDs. We need to mobilize these folks on the ground. And some will want to door knock. Some will want to work on policy. In our last campaign, we had a whole bunch who wanted to bake and fill the fridge with fantastic, healthy food. So everybody has a skill. And I believe that's the kind of mobilization that we need to build inside the party to create this sense of momentum and energy. And that's what the Green Party needs nationally as well. So this applies at two levels. It applies in terms of taking on the climate emergency, and it also applies in terms of mobilizing our own party and getting us moving in the right direction in a united, well-organized, empowering kind of way. Did you have a follow-up, Gavin? Oh, okay, great.
No, that's fine, thanks. I might have more later.
Wonderful.
I wanted to
Go ahead.
ask a question about China. The Globe and Mail, and I don't know when it happened, but the Globe and Mail probably a month or so ago has started to publish every day on the front page of the print edition the number of days that the two fellows have been jailed. So it's like day number 531 or something. And I'm going to age myself, but those of you might remember when the Iranian hostages were captured, Americans put yellow ribbons around the tree, and I guess I got up to 300 and something. What do you think about Canada's relationship with China, and how do you think the Green Party should speak to it? Should the Green Party be talking about that kind of thing?
It's really interesting, Paul. That question comes up over and over again. And the first time it was asked, I was surprised. But I'd say at least half of our calls, people in the Green Party are very concerned about China. And as you mentioned, Michael Kovrig and Michael Spavor are still essentially living in terrible solitary confinement conditions. And they're not the only Canadians who are in effect being held hostage by the Chinese government. And it's something that Canadians are not forgetting, and rightly so. And I do see a serious problem with China's global interests, the way it treats its neighbors in the South China Sea, particularly weaker neighbors like the Philippines and Vietnam. And I also think that Barack Obama was right when he said the US naval forces need to pivot away from the Atlantic and towards the Pacific and address the serious threat that China poses to key allies, not just of the United States, but also of Canada. And so I'm very concerned about how China is projecting its power and how it's treating its neighbors. Perhaps the most serious concern is how it's addressing the democracy movement in Hong Kong. I think its interference in Hong Kong's affairs, its crushing of the democracy movement is a disgrace. Others will say, you know, the imprisonment of its Muslim population, the Uyghur population, is a much greater human rights violation, and they'd probably be right. That doesn't get as much attention, but both its treatment of the Hong Kong democracy movement and its concentration camps for Uyghurs are shocking violations of international human rights norms. It's obviously a sensitive issue because China is also a huge trading partner of Canada's, and they have significant leverage over our economy. The impact of their ban on canola imports is an example of that really hurt Canadian farmers. But I do think Canada, and especially the Green Party, needs to stand up for international human rights. We need to stand up for the rule of law. And it's very, very important, I think, for the Green Party to stand strong on the issue and to hold the government's feet to the fire, because Justin Trudeau and the Liberals have been very, very weak in terms of how they've addressed essentially the extrajudicial kidnapping of 2 Canadians. We should be holding them to account.
Awesome. Thank you for the answer, David. Does anyone else, would anyone else like to pose a question? Hi, Suzanne. Yes, go ahead, please.
Well, I was speaking to somebody earlier today who's really, really concerned about the Michael Moore film and was feeling quite discouraged that perhaps, green energy wasn't an actual solution. Well, I already know the answer to that, but I'll let you explain it in your words.
Yeah, I think we agree on this one, Suzanne, for sure. As much as we agree on everything else, I think that it was a very unfortunate movie. The key data relating to renewable energy, wind and solar was very, very out of date. Gavin and I at the start of this had a conversation about Tesla's amazing developments in battery technology and how that can really back up renewable grids. Australia has the largest battery farm in the world that's now been developed and is backstopping their renewable grids. And the world is changing so fast that data that's 10 years old is vastly out of date. So that movie really was unfortunate in terms of providing climate deniers and others some tools to attack us with. But having said that, even a broken clock is right twice a day. And there are some messages in that movie that I think are right. The criticism of biomass as a fuel source, I think, is right on. They are exactly right. We should not be cutting trees down to power our economy. That's exactly the wrong thing to be doing. And the other thing was the overall theme that we live on a finite planet, and constant growth capitalism does not fit with a finite planet. And there are a couple of candidates in this race who are running on an eco-socialist platform. I mentioned earlier Alex Terrell and Dimitri Lascaris. And even though I am not an eco-socialist and I disagree with their argument that the Green Party should take a sharp turn to the left, that's what they're arguing, those are their words, I do actually agree with part of their analysis, which is we need to really look carefully at how our capitalist system is working. And the movie was right. Constant growth capitalism in a finite world is not, it just doesn't make sense. And we're seeing the effects of that. On a positive note, we're seeing the positive effects of an economy that's slowing down, of an airline industry that's slowing down, and a cruise ship industry that's slowing down right now with COVID-19. And so even though nobody is celebrating COVID-19, it is a terrible pandemic and a terrible tragedy. There are some lessons to be learned from this tragedy. And one of them is that we need to figure out how to manage a new kind of capitalism that is not based on constant growth. Thanks for the question.
I believe, Bob, you had your hand up.
Yeah, thanks, Blair. Thanks, David. Seeing as I was on the Fairville Canada National Council call today, so you can imagine what my question is going to be about. I want to know about proportional representation, more particularly with respect to how high up on the priority scale it would be in your mind for the Green Party going forward.
That's a lovely question, a very friendly question. I think I'm going to reveal our friendship, Bob. And Bob and I served on the board of Fairville Canada for years together. And we see eye to eye on this question. Proportional representation is a critical priority for the Green Party. not just because it's the right thing to do and the fair thing to do, but also because strategically it's critical to our future. I'd also like to say, before I just elaborate on that, Bob, congratulations on getting elected as BC's federal council representative.
Thank you.
It's a huge job that you're taking on, and I think I really applaud you for running and for taking on this 2-year responsibility. So thank you very much for
Welcome.
for that service. But just coming back to proportional representation, ever since I was a university student, I felt that our system was unfair. The Greens need to get, I think it's over 400,000 votes to win a single seat. The Liberals, if you do the math, it's 37,000 votes. If you divide the number of seats the Liberals won by the number of Canadians who voted Liberal, it's basically 37,000 Canadians to win one seat for the Liberals, and it's well over 300,000 for the Greens. So we have a system that's not fair. And then the next question is, how do we make it fair? And I am not a fan of referendums. I'm a fan of turning it over to regular people. BC did this, and it was very successful. Have a citizens' assembly, leave it to them to invite experts to come and talk to them about the fairest electoral system in the world. Where are they? How do they work? And then get citizens to decide. I'd say for a country the size of Canada, we should have 150, maybe 200 citizens in a citizens' assembly online from all walks of life, Indigenous people, people of color, people who are less well off, a very diverse group, selected largely by lot at random. And I am convinced that that would work better than having politicians who have their own self-interest very much in mind, making decisions around how our politicians should be elected. So I think that that is a mechanism that we can sell to Canadians. It was sold to British Columbians very successfully. And so I am a strong believer in Citizens' Assembly and making that a top priority for the Green Party.
Good.
Thank you, Bob.
Awesome.
I guess as a follow-up, if you wanted to deal with this, one of the problems with the Green Party promoting electoral reform, proportional representation, is it makes us look self-serving.
Yes.
Right. Any ideas around? I mean, that's not an easy question. There you go,
No,
David.
well, I've thought about it. It's a great question because the BC Greens were really smart in handling that very problem. I don't know if you remember, but early on when they were negotiating with the NDP and the provincial Liberals on who they would support, they were saying consistently that proportional representation was a priority, but it wasn't their top priority. Campaign financing, was their #1 priority. Getting dirty money out of politics and leveling the playing field for all parties. And I thought that was very, very astute because that is a problem, and it was a problem. And the Greens, if you remember, in the last provincial election, refused to take corporate or union money, which was also very smart. They got a lot of a positive reaction for that. But I think strategically, they all knew proportional representation is critical. If we don't have fair voting, it's very hard for people to vote for smaller parties like the Greens. And I thought they were really smart. I think what we can honestly do as a federal party is exactly the same thing. The climate emergency is always our #1 issue. We have, like I said earlier, 6 or 7 years to go before it's irreversible, according to the best science. So we have to focus on the climate emergency. But I think a close second is electoral reform. I also think the question Paul asked earlier about guaranteed livable income, especially in the post-COVID world, is critical. So we have 2 or 3 really critical issues that we should be highlighting. My personal issue, and I feel very strongly about integrity in government. And I think the SNC-Lavalin scandal is a very good example of how governments can go wrong if they're not focusing on ethics and integrity. But that's a personal thing, and we would need to look at what the party polling says, what our party grassroots say, and pull together a very tight, focused message around our top 2 or 3 priorities in the next campaign. And I'd like to see proportional representation up there, but also deal with the problem that you raised.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Right on. I just want to say welcome to the call, Brian. He just joined while you're in the middle of your question there, David. But John, you have your hand raised.
Yep, can everybody hear me?
Yes, we can.
Yes.
So John here. So I'm both a BC Green and a federal green. I have a question about electricity. Good thing I'm behind the screen, so no one can attack me when I say this. But I've actually been somewhat torn living in BC around the issue of Site C, and part of the reason is, if you take the example of the federal the Mission Possible platform from the last election, two of the tenets in there that interested me were vehicle electrification and east-west energy grid. And I think that both of those things are important. And when you put those in context, you have to think, well, if those things are important, then where's the electricity going to come from? And so that's my question.
Yeah, John, you are not alone in being torn by that issue. The Green Party provincially, as you probably know as well as I do, has been torn by that as well. Originally, Andrew Weaver, when he was leader, was an advocate for Site C. And for the same reasons you suggest, that demand for electricity is going to skyrocket, especially if we move to electric vehicles. And it's relatively clean, certainly much cleaner than coal and natural gas with its methane emissions. So there is definitely an argument for hydro. My pitch would be that we shift from large-scale hydro to run-of-river hydro. I think there's huge untapped potential in terms of run-of-river, and the data is clear on this, that the environmental impacts, especially in terms of lost agricultural lands, large-scale hydro is terrible in terms of its impact on agricultural land, especially Site C. Very, very valuable agricultural land. With global climate change, our agricultural land in Canada and in BC in particular is going to become more and more valuable to us. So I would say Quebec has shown the way in terms of large-scale hydro, and they're really benefiting from it in terms of lowering greenhouse gas emissions. But Quebec is also starting to look at run-of-river, and we should too. I worry that BC Hydro has a culture, an engineering culture of big projects that have serious impacts, including impacts on First Nations rights, which are not being properly addressed. So the other thing I'd say, John, is solar power is becoming so inexpensive. In my own riding here, the Sauk First Nation is completely off diesel generator and on to solar. And Sauk, where they're located, is a relatively rainy part of the world. But not only have they completely left fossil fuels, they're entirely on solar, and they did it in a very cost-effective way. While they did it, they trained up their own workforce, and now their workforce is traveling the country to different First Nations and helping other First Nations across Canada get off diesel generators. So I'm a really big fan of small-scale solar as well, and I think with wind and geothermal technology moving so fast as well, we should really be looking at renewables before we look at large-scale solar. Last thing I'll say, really the last thing, is with evolving battery technology, which I mentioned earlier in the call, I think you might have heard, Tesla is really building large battery storage facilities, the largest one in the world, just being built in Australia, just completed rather in Australia. And that provides the sort of battery power, the background to a really renewable powered east-west grid. And I think that as the battery technology progresses, these other renewables are the solution. It'll take time, but I also think it's the right way to go. Did you have a follow-up, or does that answer your question?
That's great. Thanks very much, David.
All right. Does anyone have a question that they would like to ask? I see Suzanne has her hand up. Yes, go ahead, please.
Okay, yeah, so you're talking about geothermal. I recently read an article all about how there are like numerous hot springs all over British Columbia that I never knew about. What are the chances of us developing that? It just makes sense to me. I mean, we live in a very volcanic province and, you know.
Yeah. If you look at Iceland or Japan or other countries, they're figuring it out, and we should too. And the good news is that we are, especially in the area of geothermal power coming from orphan wells. I'm a native Albertan, and I love to tell my fellow Albertans, even though I've been here in BC for 16 years now, that geothermal is the future for northeastern BC and for Alberta. And the town of Hinton, Alberta, you can Google this, has a geothermal project underway where they're repurposing orphan wells. And rather than simply capping them, they're figuring out how to extract geothermal energy from those wells. And I think this is an area of great potential. I agree. We have the sort of physical, geological characteristics, as well as a huge number of orphan wells that have been abandoned by fossil fuel companies. So let's use those assets. And I was impressed by the Trudeau government's decision to invest, I believe it's $1 billion in orphan well recovery and so on. And part of that should definitely go to doing what Hinton, Alberta is already doing and exploring the real potential for repurposing of and recovery of orphan wells and turning them into a plus rather than a huge environmental minus.
Okay, so I was going to ask you, Kate, I was having an argument with somebody recently on Facebook, and I try to avoid this as much as possible because it tends to upset me, but it was basically when Trudeau did, pledge this $1 billion for orphan wells, or to clean up orphan wells so that, it would create jobs, and then that provides a nice little transition for us, going from oil and gas to clean energy. These people were saying, oh, no, what they want to do is they want to re-drill these oil wells to get more oil. And I kept saying, but where does it say that? So am I wrong, or did I misread this, or because I just couldn't see that. I saw that he was transitioning, so I thought this was a good thing.
That is my understanding too, Suzanne. My understanding is that they are working on wells that have been abandoned by fossil fuel companies and figuring out how can they use the temperature changes from the deep wells to the surface to generate renewable electricity. And I'm not an expert in this area, but apparently the engineering has been done already. There are places like Iceland where this has been worked out. And the huge expense apparently in geothermal development is the drilling deep enough into the earth to capture the geothermal energy. So that work has been done. And this does look like there's huge potential, as I said, in northeastern BC and Alberta for this, and Saskatchewan as well, actually. Saskatchewan has a huge orphan well problem as well. So there's hope, and I hope that the pilot projects that are now underway in Hinton actually bear fruit quickly.
Awesome. I see, Gavin, your hand is up. Would you like to ask your question?
Yeah, hi. I'd like to bring up the Homer Simpson in the room and talk about nuclear. Of course, in the 70s and 80s, they went on the marches, anti-war, anti-nuclear, etc. But times have changed. The nuclear reactors that we were talking about then were designed in the 40s to produce bombs. There is a lot of new technology, including molten salt reactors, that will never melt down due to inherent design, using thorium, which apparently was considered safe enough at one time to use in toothpaste to give a glowing smile. And of course, fusion. Interesting thing about fusion is that it was once said that yes, nuclear fusion is 50 years away and always has been. And hopefully not always will be, because there are designs, I think in Australia they came up with a whole new concept that would have nuclear fusion producing electricity directly instead of going through heating of water, which would be brilliant. And there is no CO2 emission, of course, from nuclear. And I think we should actually look at it. And a lot of environmentalists are the same mind. They looked at the facts of global warming. They looked at the facts at new nuclear and saying, yeah, we should pursue that. And of course, Bill Gates is also involved in it.
I appreciate the question. Thank you, Gavin. The governments of New Brunswick and Saskatchewan and Ontario are looking into that very question. They've started a project together to figure out how could they get small-scale nuclear off the ground in their provinces. And the argument, there is credibility to the argument. We know that coal has disastrous impacts on our environment, and both Saskatchewan and New Brunswick have coal-fired power plants. I think New Brunswick is down to one now. And they are looking desperately for alternatives. So I can understand why people look into it. I have a couple of key concerns. One is timeline. Coming back to what the science tells us, if we only have 6 or 7 years until climate change is irreversible, we need to move much, much faster than figuring out how small-scale nuclear could actually work. I worked at the Department of Justice in Ottawa for 15 years, and one of the files I was responsible for was settling a huge dispute between AECL and Nordion, both key actors in Canada's nuclear industry. And it was clear that the regulatory context for nuclear is extremely slow, and rightly so. People don't want to make mistakes, and Canada's nuclear regulator is very, very careful. So my view is nuclear has a serious problem in terms of addressing our climate emergency in a timely fashion. Secondly, nuclear has a serious problem with budgeting and assessing engineering costs. And we've seen that with the Chalk River projects. It's consistent around the world, budgets being blown, not just double or triple, but serious problems managing the construction and bringing online nuclear power plants. And especially in the context of solar energy power dropping through the floor. I mean, it's way more competitive now than fossil fuels.
You might have a look.
Yeah.
So my view is that given the timelines and given the costs, nuclear does not look like a realistic option. But I'll just finish with this, my last point. I really believe our party has to be driven by science, and it has to be driven by the best evidence. And if the best evidence is that the safety concerns can be addressed, the cost concerns can be addressed, the implementation delays can be addressed, then we should listen and keep an open mind. But in my view right now, this does not look like it's a serious option compared to investments in renewables.
Oops.
Gavin, did that answer your question, or do you have a follow-up?
Not completely. Certainly the Chalk River is very old technology, very large scale. And certainly there is a existential crisis, but there will be an after. And in the future, we will have to have alternative methods. Certainly solar, in my opinion, is the ultimate, because the sun is shining and we won't be adding any more heat to the planet by using solar power. We will with all other forms, but there will be a future. So we have to have both short-term and long-term plans. And I think small-scale modular nuclear, which has been investigated a lot, and it seems to be viable, certainly not probably in the short term, but in the longer term. And I think we do have to have a longer term vision, not just a short term emergency. And certainly even renewable energy takes time and effort. It takes a lot of material to make solar panels. Certainly there's new technology using perovskite, I think it is. It's a lower cost, higher efficiency solar panel, but it's still in the infancy stage, right? So what are we going to do? Well, one thing we can do is to do what the virus did. Get people to change their habits. Like, hold up your home, don't travel by airplanes, don't drive, A lot of what we do that's been halted by COVID is stuff that's non-essential. Like it's all about the three C's: comfort, convenience, and consumerism. A lot of stuff that we can afford to get rid of. Like, we need a restaurant on every street corner or in the middle of the street? If you look back in the 50s, it was a really rare treat to go out for dinner, really rare. And people learned to cook. I learned to cook my own breakfast when I was 6, which included lighting the oil stove.
Well, Gavin, I think you're right about really paying attention to another C, which is conservation. I think that's a place where we can achieve the fastest change, and it applies on all sorts of areas. It applies to how we consume our groceries, how our food chains work. There's massive waste, and figuring out how we reduce waste, how we reduce energy consumption, how we can retrofit our homes and buildings. I see massive opportunities there, and we campaigned on it in the last campaign. And I really believe that. And on nuclear energy, like I said earlier, I would keep an open mind, but it's not an empty mind. And we may have to disagree on the potential right now for nuclear, but I also agree, let's keep it an open mind for the long term, because energy is essential to our lives, and energy that's safe and sustainable is critical. So even though I don't think there's a realistic short-term small-scale nuclear that's been developed and that will get through Canada's regulatory process, let's keep an open mind. All right, who's next?
I think Kim had her hand up.
Yeah, I did. There. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Okay, sorry about all the fussing around I've been doing, but I think I could be losing my power any minute, and I tried to unhook my earbuds and plug into power to charge, and then I couldn't hardly hear anything. So I'm back to my earbuds, so you may see me just fade out and die. Anyway, which wouldn't be far from the way I feel today anyway, fading out and dying. But anyway, David, you know, Lydia ran in Couch and Malahat Langford, and she ran a really good campaign. Are you guys hearing me okay?
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
She ran a really good campaign. I mean, she came in late to the race, and there was a number of things that we struggled with. But what surprised me was the number of Conservative votes. And I'll say not only surprised me, but dismayed me. I actually was not at all surprised that Alistair won again, because he's very popular here and he's done a pretty good job for us, and that was the word on the street. But I think he got 22,000 or something. Lydia got, I think, 13, and the Conservative candidate, who was a woman I'd never heard of before. I guess she was in the legislature in Alberta, and she didn't, in debate, she didn't seem to me to have all that much to really offer. But she got almost 18,000 votes. So I'm thinking to myself, there were a lot of Conservative votes that just thought, oh, well, I don't want NDP and I don't want Liberal and I don't know anything about Green and they have no hope anyways. So therefore I'm voting Conservative. I don't know where they all came from, but how can we convert them? How can we get those wishy-washy Conservatives that think that Greens are just going to waste their money? How can we get them over to our side and help them to realize that, you know, we're the choice, because now they don't have to be, you know, Liberal, which I guess they have an allergic reaction to, and they don't have to be Labour, which they also have an allergic reaction to.
Yeah.
Right?
I think that's exactly right. I think appealing to Conservatives on the issues they really care about is the key. And I hope you don't mind me saying this, Bob, because you just popped up in front of me, but Bob Mackay is a perfect example. He came over from the Progressive Conservatives to the Greens. And
awesome.
I shouldn't speak for you, Bob, but you and I have talked about this, and Bob and I have knocked on doors together, and a lot of doors together. And what I say, and Bob, feel free to jump in, but what I say when I meet a Conservative, the first thing is to figure out what they really care about. And especially for older conservatives, if they have kids and grandkids, they really care about their kids and grandkids.
That's true, for sure.
So I really, and even if it's a younger conservative, they have a bike on the front yard or small shoes in their doorway, I really go to that future generations. And we all share a concern for future generations. Some conservatives are really keen on fiscal issues. And we actually ran on the same 5-year timeline for balancing budgets. And they would be really surprised when we said we're the only party that has seriously worked with the parliamentary budget officer to cost out our platform. In the last 2 elections we've done it, or last 3 elections we've done it. And we are going to balance our budget in 5 years. And the eco-socialists in the race are calling me the fiscal conservative. I'm not, I'm just fiscally responsible. Just like, you know, Alan Blakeney and others, very progressive leaders. And so I say we are fiscally responsible, and it's the right thing for the Green Party to be. And especially in these times where we've had massive spending, part of our next election platform has to be on how will you bring things back into balance? What is your plan? Yeah, absolutely. Yeah. So fiscal.
I was just going to say, you know, again, back to the last election, what really hurt us was that budget. Well, one of the things that the NDPs certainly used against us with a dirty mail out at the end of the day was the 2 things that apparently Elizabeth hadn't hadn't whipped somebody into shape who was pro-life and not in favor of abortion or something. I don't quite remember that whole thing. I think I blacked it out of my mind. And then the other was the fact that our first budget wasn't balanced. And then, of course, we went back to the drawing board and came back with a balanced budget. And that was the one that was presented. But, you know, they used the one with the holes in it first against us. And so I just, you know, was dismayed that we didn't get it right the first time. Like, how does that happen?
That was really, really disappointing. And people worked very hard on that. I know the folks who worked on our budget and who were dealing with the parliamentary budget officer. They worked so hard. And one of the problems is the parliamentary budget office was much slower than anticipated in addressing our questions. So the lesson learned is we need to really start early. We also didn't have full information. We did not have a clear understanding of exactly what the parliamentary budget office was working for. It was repaired, but as you say, the damage was done. Bob, did you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think we need to remember we are so much in the bubble and that we know all these details. For your average person, your average conservative who's whatever age, the primary things is we're not tax and spend people, number one. We have, one of the things that blew me away when I first got involved with the Green Party was we had a fully costed budget checked out by the parliamentary budget officer. Just those 2 things by themselves. You get on the doorstep with a person that seems to have that leaning. It's a good stuff to mention. And of course, small business.
Yeah. We've always been an advocate for small business. And there are other types of conservatives too. Like we have quite a few military people in my riding because of the base in Esquimalt. And they were really surprised that we had, you know, a fully set out defense program and foreign affairs program. They wanted to hear about it, you know, and so I think appealing to people on the things they care about is and it's true of people from all different walks of life and parties, is first listen, figure out what's important, and then appeal to them on the things they care about. And that's true of conservatives and everybody else. We need to connect on their ground. As Bob, you just said, it's not about us giving our highfalutin message. It's about us listening and then connecting with them on the things they care about.
Right.
Thanks for the question, Kim.
Yeah. Can I ask another practical question? And maybe this isn't really the place to ask it, but it's just a sort of coming from a political newbie. How does someone like yourself, if you're the successful candidate, how do you effectively lead the party when you don't hold a seat?
Yeah, it's a problem for all the candidates in this race. Nobody in
Of
the
course
race
it is,
holds a
yeah.
seat. So it is a problem. And I do think that it would be important to win a seat as early as possible.
Yeah.
Again, we're maybe getting into the weeds, but there's a winnable seat in New Brunswick. The incumbent is a Liberal who is battling cancer. If there's a by-election, then the new leader should run in that seat. That's a winnable seat. I actually campaigned in that riding. I'm the only candidate in this race that's campaigned across Canada for Greens at the provincial, federal, and municipal level. I went to Memramcook, Cantramar, New Brunswick, and campaigned for a fantastic candidate, Megan Mitten. That's a very francophone riding, by the way.
And
she
so
was a city
important that
councillor.
you've got your fluency in the French. Yeah.
You know, being able to speak French and understand, like I did my bar admission course in Ontario in French, so I understand legal French, and I litigated for the Department of Justice in French. But more importantly in New Brunswick is that I played hockey on French teams in Hull, as it then was.
More importantly, yeah.
So I understand hockey French too. And, I met this farmer there. I hope I'm not digressing too far, but I met a farmer, and he was talking in a very old-fashioned French, but we were able to kid each other. He wanted to bet me $50 that the Green Party would never win in this riding. He said in French, "This riding has been red since Noah came ashore." And you will never win this riding. And I wish I'd bet him, because we won that riding by 11 votes. And when you win a riding by 11 votes, every volunteer says, well, it's a good thing I went from BC and knocked on doors.
No kidding.
We all take credit for it. But I think
exactly. So again, a political newbie question. Basically, you can run in any riding as long as you agree to move there, or how does that work?
Yeah, I think the new leader should make a commitment that they will move to a winnable riding. And this might sound a little strange, but Esquimalt-Saint-Anne-Chouc is a winnable riding. We came second,
I was so
26%
disappointed.
of the vote.
Yeah.
And, you know, if somebody else won the race and said, David, I'd like to run in Esquimalt-Saint-Anne-Chouc, I'd be the first one to say, yep, I'm going to knock on doors for you.
Yeah.
Because I think it's so important for the new leader to get in. And you know, the other candidates I think they've all come forth. Glenn Murray didn't run in the last federal election, but the other candidates have all come third or fourth in their riding. So they would have to move to a riding that's winnable. And Esquimalt-Saint-Anne-Chouc is certainly a winnable riding. I think we will win this riding next time.
That would be very exciting. Yeah. Okay.
I think Susan has a question, so we're going to move on to that.
Mine was just a quick one, and then we'll have to kind of end because it's past 8 o'clock. Okay, so we sort of mentioned the cruise ships, and I didn't realize exactly how huge this cruise ship industry was until this pandemic came along, and I'm floored at how much pollution this is causing them, because they use bunker fuel and they dump stuff in the ocean and that sort of thing. So my question to you is in Canada, can we impose some laws? Like, for example, you can no longer use bunker fuel from now on. You must, I don't know if they can have some sort of a wind turbine or whatever that they could, power the ship by. Is this possible to do?
You know, this is not an area of expertise for me, Suzanne, but I know from our experience in Victoria, we were expecting the largest cruise ship traffic in history coming to Victoria this spring and summer and fall, and it didn't happen. And I know that people here in Victoria, especially in the James Bay area, where the cruise ships dock, they're living a different life. They have to live with terrible pollution all the time when the cruise ship season is on. And I do know that the city of Victoria has managed to implement some bylaw restrictions on the cruise ships. And I believe that Transport Canada has imposed certain obligations. For example, they must plug into shore power as opposed to running their generators, which have terrible, terrible emissions. This isn't an area of expertise, but I do think just from those two examples that there is a scope for Canada to exercise the maximum jurisdiction, because this is a serious problem. And it's not just cruise ships, it's other cargo ships. Transportation, marine transportation is a huge source of greenhouse gas emissions. And it's something that requires, I think, collaboration internationally as well. But I totally agree, Canada should do the maximum.
Yeah. For sure. I mean, I don't think it's an industry that's going to die. It's just getting bigger and bigger all the time. The ships are getting bigger, and you know, we have to do something about it.
Yeah.
So
I really can't, sorry, just a little humor here, but I really can't understand the attraction on those ships. I only went on a cruise once for 5 days, and in 5 days I gained 8 pounds. So I'm never going on a cruise again.
Yeah.
Sorry, just a little lightness there. I'd far rather go on a walking tour, you know what I'm saying?
That's it. Very good. And we live in the most beautiful place in the world. Why not walk on Vancouver Island or in BC? Yeah, totally agree. I'm thinking, Blair, that we should give people a little hint of what's to come. We have, so if you don't mind, I'll just jump in. I'm happy to answer questions as long as people want to stay on. But one thing we do as a team is we have a continuous improvement process. And so we talk, it usually starts with me and then it goes to Blair, and then we open it up to the floor. We talk about what went well on the call and what needs to be improved. And some of that can relate to how we handled the call, how we advertised the call. Often it relates to the quality of the candidates' responses, which is perfectly appropriate. I've been working on some things. And so I'm happy to have another couple of questions, but anybody who wants to stay on for the continuous improvement process is very welcome. And the only condition is that you must say one thing that should be improved and one thing you really liked. And so you can start putting your thinking caps on in case you do want to stay on. And we will go back to Blair to figure out if there are any other questions. Maybe there's some chat questions. I see a couple of new chat. Nope,
we're good. We're all caught up.
Okay.
Well, I will take my leave, Dave. I told my wife that I would be about an hour. So thank you very much. Well done.
Nice to see you, Bob. Thank you for coming. Yeah.
Okay, bye.
Nice to see you. Nice to meet you, I should say.
Yeah.
Great. Nice meeting you too.
Yeah, and I'll head out too. The only thing was I had trouble getting the Zoom link because I can't remember why. I emailed somebody and somebody said they didn't know about this. And anyway, doesn't really matter, but.
That's really good feedback. We need to make sure that every time we email people, we email the link. So thank you, Kim, for that feedback. Excellent feedback.
Yeah, because I did post it to the CML Facebook page, but I doubt anybody joined us, but you never know. And if they, I'm kind of a bulldog and I'll follow it, but a lot of people would just say, oh, well, if they didn't get through.
Right.
You know what I mean?
Thank you very much. I appreciate that.
Okay. You're welcome.
On that note too, I was just checking my email to see if anybody was having trouble getting on, and the school trustee of the Burnaby Council was trying really hard. She says this link just doesn't work. So I don't know if maybe I copied it wrong or something got left off in one of the postings I did, but that's another thing that, we could certainly improve.
That's a really good point. You know what we should do in all our emails is also give a cell phone number so people can call us and we can help sort it out. And if we do that, and every time we invite people, if you can't get in, call us on the cell phone and we'll sort it out. That's a lesson learned, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Really good. Two good points.
Great.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay. Thanks very much, everybody.
Thanks,
and
see you later.
Good night.
Bye.
Have a good evening.
Good evening. Bye-bye.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye.
So is anybody else wanting to leave, or will people stay on and provide feedback? It looks like we've lost a few people, and that's fine. So
might not know how to get off. If you want to get off, just take your cursor and you'll see the bottom light up, and it says leave meeting in the right-hand corner. Oh, there we go.
We have, I don't know, Suzanne, do you know Lawrence Taylor from the riding?
Yes, of course. Oh. He's not from my riding. He's actually from Vancouver East or something like that. No, Vancouver South.
Right on. Well, they're coming on just for the continuous improvement program. So here we go.
That's great. Welcome, Lawrence. Hello, Lawrence.
Just in time.
Lawrence, we're just wrapping up our call, but if you would like to ask any questions, you're very welcome to.
Sorry, no, yeah, I was double booked.
No
I was hoping it was going for a while. Oh well.
Do you have any questions? I'm happy to stay on and answer them if you do.
Okay. Let me think here. Okay, here's a real general question for you.
Sure.
So there are a lot of activists in the Green Party. But the Green Party is a political party. So as a leader, what do you think you have to tell activists or bring to activists to make them a cohesive and effective party? And what would be the differences from being an activist group versus a political party?
Yeah.
So what does the leader have to bring to bring those people into that mindset?
Yeah, I love that question. It's a really difficult question. My own experience from the last campaign is it is possible to reach out to activist groups, people who prefer to protest than to knock on doors and bring voters into the Green fold. I especially managed to reach out to the climate strikers, the Friday climate strikers. Part of it was just by being there consistently every Friday with them on the steps of the legislature here in Victoria. Part of it was by recruiting a very young campaign team from across Canada and building from the ground up. And then our young campaign team went out and reached out to other young activists and their friends. And that brought in a significant crew of door knockers and phoners. But you're right, they're a different culture and we need to accommodate that culture. So a key thing is finding out what people like to do and then enabling them to do it. And some of the activists here on South Vancouver Island are relatively old and really aren't very interested in door knocking, but they will do phoning. And if they don't like phoning, they will bake and bring in food to the fridge, and so the young campaigners can be fed. So I think it's partly about finding out what do the activists like to do, what are they good at, and empowering them to do what they really want to do. I think frontline empowerment is critical, and making people feel valued. The young Greens we brought in 25 from across Canada, and we fed them and we billeted them. And one of the things we said is, you lead your group, name it, figure out what you want to do, how you can help the campaign. They called it Paint the Island Green. They figured out how they would work together. They were a huge part of our campaign. They energized the whole campaign. And my daughter Sarah helped to organize it, and it turned out to be a huge strength. But it was partly self-organized. And I think activists kind of like that idea of self-organization.
Right.
They do not like the idea of bureaucratic hierarchy. So they really need to be empowered. So those are some of the things that we've done. And I think your question is a critical question strategically for the Greens. If we can mobilize activists from across Canada, 500,000 people demonstrated in Montreal with Greta Thunberg, right? If we can mobilize, even 1% of that in Montreal, it would be a huge impact on green prospects in Quebec, right? So it's a critical question. It's not often asked, but I do think that for us to win nationally and grow our seats from 3 to 12 to 20 to a majority government, we have to tap into movement type politics. Bernie Sanders did this. A book was written about it, Rules for Revolutionaries. And I think we need to tap into that kind of politics. Lawrence, I hate to put you on the spot, but can I ask you if you're related to Cynthia?
Yes, I am.
Cynthia is a really good friend. I don't know if she's mentioned to you, but I know Cynthia really well from our days in Ottawa. And Annemiek and Cynthia talk on the phone every couple of weeks, my wife Annemiek. So I just want to say hello.
Okay, well, I hope you have a good phone plan. That's all I can say.
Cynthia loves to talk on the phone, and
so
Annemiek usually sets aside an hour for her calls. It's really nice to see you in person. She's spoken a lot to me about you, and I hope I'm not revealing secrets here, but I went to Montreal, across the country, and met with about 50 campaign managers and candidates in Montreal. And the sense of disappointment in Montreal regarding what they saw as a lack of competence of our national campaign was really shocking.
Right.
And Cynthia shared some stories about things that she had witnessed as well. She campaigned hard for the Greens. Confirmed that we have a lot to learn, and we are a long way from being a professional seat-winning organization. And as you said, that's what a political party should be about.
One of the problems I have is that we always talk about ourselves, we're a grassroots party. We shouldn't be a grassroots party. We should be an actual, really, full political party, right? And I had all kinds of people saying, a vote for the Greens, the vote wasted. And I kept telling them, no, you need to vote for who you want, what you really want. Otherwise, we're going to still get the same old, same old. By the way, I've got a comment, Lawrence, on your haircut. I see you haven't had it in a long time.
Well, you have to touch your face, right? So.
What's that?
You're not supposed to touch your face, right? So.
Oh, I know, but your hair's so long.
Lawrence, I'm very happy to chat, and actually I'd be happy to give you a call if you wanted to talk further, or we can do it here. Just so you know, we were just moving into our continuous improvement process, which is about sharing comments and what can be improved and what went well with the call. And if you have another question, or maybe I should just give you a call.
Yeah, sometime I'll email you and
yeah, let's set up a phone call. I'd love to chat. And another thing, and Suzanne's done this now really successfully here with her writing, but if you wanted to set up a Zoom call in your writing, that would be fantastic.
We're going to meet with some of the EDA folks tomorrow, actually. So
great. And Suzanne did it on her own in her writing, but you can do it on your own in your writing, or with other EDAs, whatever works best. And we have the Zoom technology, and we can get the invitations out. We can send you banners to email to your members and workers. But I'd love to work together with you to set up either a multiple writing Zoom call or a single writing Zoom call, or both. We had about, 10 people on at the maximum. And
we had 12.
12. And so it's not like we need huge crowds. And Blair Robertson, who you can see next to you, or at least you guys are together on my screen, is our national tour leader for Zoom calls. So we'd love to be in touch with you.
Okay, cool. Yeah, so I'll set something up.
That's great. That's really great. Thank you.
Have a good night.
Yeah, good night. Yeah.
Okay.
So in terms of continuous improvement, I don't know, Dad and Mom, if you guys want to participate in the continuous improvement, or email me your comments, but you're welcome to unmute and share your comments if you wish. I'll start. I blew the conclusion of this session. I did not conclude by thanking the organizers. I did not conclude by inviting people to go to my website and volunteer and donate. And I did not conclude by saying anybody who wants to set up a Zoom meeting, please do.
Yeah.
So that was not my best performance in terms of conclusion. On a more positive note, I think I have better structure in the introduction. It went on a little bit too long.
No, it didn't actually. We weren't recording that. I wish we had. And that's when I was telling Blair, I was sending him a little message, can we record this please? Can we record this please? Because I'm planning to put this on somewhere on our EDA so that anybody can listen to it. And that's the part that I would have really loved it if they had heard that, right?
Right. That's a good idea.
Yeah, so that might be a good idea for you, Blair, to always ask at the very beginning if people would like it recorded or not.
If you would, I guess another thing we can do, Suzanne, if you want, at the next meeting, we could record one of the intros, and then I can send you that one, and then you could just post one of the a different intro. It wouldn't be for this one, obviously, because it's not recorded, but just from the next event that we do it, I could record it and send it.
I see. Yeah, so you kind of splice it or something like that.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay, that sounds fine to me.
Cool.
Yeah, that's great.
Okay.
Yeah, good idea.
Anyways, no, I thought you sounded really good. I would have liked it if more people had gotten in, but I'm thinking that a lot of people might not have gotten in when they were trying. But it still worked and everything, and I learned something, and I learned a few things from you that I didn't know, and
great.
I have lots to learn.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate you taking the time to set this up. I think it worked out well. 12 people is a really good number. And,
you think so? Oh, okay. Well, I was hoping my dream is that we'd have like 60, 70 people or something like that. But we're not close to the election yet. We still have a long ways to go. So.
And I'd love to do another one too. We've had one on, we've had two on, and we've had, the biggest I think we've had is 20. So this was great. And I'm very happy to come back again and do it again you know, next month even if you want. June.
Okay, well, I've got Amita next in 2 weeks. In 2 weeks after that, I got Judy.
Great.
And I also contacted, what's the name of the fellow who used to be the mayor?
Glenn Murray.
Yeah, was it Glenn Murray? Yeah, that I contacted, but I haven't had an answer yet, but I was going to try to get them all. But I was also going to leave out, are we still recording? Are we
No.
recording?